Something that I've noticed in my time of watching the NBA is how much a good coach really means for a good team. But that raises the question of how much of a game is dictated on good coaching, or if winning basketball games solely lies on the players. The coach that I'm going to be focusing on is Steve Kerr and the Golden State Warriors. You either know Steve Kerr for his time on the Chicago Bulls with Michael Jordan during his second three-peat, or you know him as the Golden State Warriors head coach who guided them to 4 championships. And as many people can agree on, he's just a straight-up winner. He just 2 championships with the Spurs, 3 with the Chicago Bulls, and then 4 as a coach with the Golden State Warriors. He's just very good at winning basketball. But there's been a lot of speculation lately on the topic of if Steve Kerr is actually a good coach, which is absolutely insane to think when he's won so many championships. But a lot of people are saying it might be because of all the great players that he has had, like Kevin Durant, Draymond Green, Stephen Curry, Klay Thompson. First, I want to take it all the way back to when Steve Kerr first arrived. At the beginning of the 2014-15 season, the Warriors were just coming off a 51-win season, but unfortunately it got ended in 7 games to the Clippers in the first round of the playoffs. After that, the Warriors released their head coach at the time, Mark Jackson, and brought Steve Kerr onto the squad as the head coach. It seemed like this move was an instant success. Steve Kerr implemented a new system to the Warriors offense. It had bits and pieces of Phil Jackson's triangle system that he ran with Michael Jordan. And it also had lots of motion and off-ball screens, which seemed to unlock Stephen Curry and Klay Thompson and turn them into superstars. Now, I'm not saying this was the only reason the Warriors' record jumped from 51 wins to 67 wins, but it was definitely a major turning point for the Warriors. Not only did they win 67 games, they also went to the championship and beat LeBron in 6 games in Steve Kerr's first year as the head coach. And as a lot of people know, the following year they ended up setting the record for the most wins in the regular season in NBA history, but they lost in the NBA Finals to LeBron James and the Cavaliers in 7 games, blowing a 3-1 lead, the first time in NBA history, but there's no telling how much of that is accounted for the way that Steve Kerr coached. Excluding the playoffs that year, the beginning of the season was a little weird for the Warriors. Steve Kerr had not been coaching the first 43 games of the year due to a back surgery that he went through during the summer. During that time, Luke Walton actually stepped in and they won 39 games and only lost 4. After Steve Kerr stepped back in, they had a record of 34-5, completing the 73-9 season. And as many of you know, the next season, the 2016-2017 season, the Warriors front office went ahead and signed Kevin Durant, which, you know, a lot of people disregard the time that Kevin Durant was on the team and don't really give Steve Kerr a whole lot of credit, considering they had 2 top 75 players of all time. Not only that, they had Andre Iguodala, prime Klay Thompson, and they had Defensive Player of the Year Draymond Green. And you know, for the first 2 years of that Kevin Durant stint, it looked easy. They went back-to-back in the championship, tied the Lakers for the best postseason record of all time with 16-1. And then you get to the 2019 season and they bring in DeMarcus Cousins. Like, what could go wrong with this team? There is nothing that Steve Kerr could do to bring this team down besides just not playing the players. They're so talented they could go out there without a playbook and win basketball games and will themselves back to another championship. But the one thing that went wrong was the injuries. Klay Thompson goes down, Kevin Durant goes down, DeMarcus Cousins goes down. You can't really fault Steve Kerr for the loss that season. It was more just, you know, bad luck. I mean, you can't stop injuries. You can't really prevent them. They just happen. And it was extremely unlucky that all 3 of them get injured going into the championship. You know, DeMarcus Cousins' quad injury against the Rockets, and then Kevin Durant and Klay Thompson both go down against the Raptors in the championship. Following that year, the Warriors lose Kevin Durant, and then Stephen Curry goes down in like the 5th game of the season with a broken hand. Klay Thompson is out with his torn ACL. there's not a whole lot. The Warriors kind of just entered this tank era, and you can't really put that on Steve Kerr either. He was coaching a bunch of G League players that haven't even touched an NBA court yet. I mean, like, the two best players that were playing were, Eric Paschall and Alec Burks. Sometimes Glenn Robinson III decided to show up, but there wasn't a whole lot that Steve Kerr could have done with that roster. And then Stephen Curry finally comes back from his hand injury, and then the league gets shut down because of COVID. They only played 65 games that year, went 15-50. Not a great season, but you can't really put the fault on Steve Kerr. And then following that year, the Warriors come back. You get Klay Thompson back and Klay Day against the Cavs. Chemistry's high. Draymond's back. Curry's back. Everyone's back. Andrew Wiggins has unlocked a completely different side than anyone has seen from him. He gets named All-Star starter. Everything's just looking good for the Warriors. But all sports analysts are saying, like, Warriors can't make it back. They're going to be a first-round exit. And they shock them. They win the first round, the second round. They make it all the way to the championship. And they take the Celtics to 6 games, beat them in Boston. It was one of the greatest displays in NBA history by a single player in Stephen Curry. And it's hard to not attribute some of that to Steve Kerr. He was such a major part in all the other championships. And that roster was not nearly as good as some of the other rosters that he had coached, with Kevin Durant and prime Andre Iguodala, and even Draymond Green's out of his prime. Klay Thompson is coming off of 2 insanely major injuries, and Stephen Curry is aging, somehow playing the best basketball of his career. But it's hard not to say Steve Kerr played a major role in that series, in all the series throughout the playoffs. And the way that he was playing bench guys, and he found people like Gary Payton to come in and play major minutes and ultimately help them win that championship. Now, following that year, they had a little bit worse of a record. They ended up getting eliminated in the second round. Watching that series, it just felt like Steve Kerr was unable to make coaching decisions on the fly, and a lot of the lineups that he threw out there were extremely questionable. Like, I'm sitting there watching this game, and I'm like, why are you putting them in together? That makes no sense. The next year, there's not much to talk about. It seemed like they lost their spark. It seems like Father Time has started to catch up with them. They didn't even make the playoffs. It just wasn't a great year to go and talk about. Now, focusing on the present, the Warriors had an amazing start to the year. They were the 1 seed for a minute, and then slowly they started to drop, and eventually they found themselves out of the playoffs entirely and just sitting in the play-in, and it looked like that's like where they were going to stay. And as someone who's a Warriors fan for a while, you assume that the Warriors are not going to make a trade at the deadline. But then Mike Dunleavy goes and trades for Jimmy Butler, which seems like it gave the Warriors a huge boost in confidence. I mean, their record is like 14-2 since Jimmy Butler has came to the team, and it seems like they are a completely different roster, and they just look like they're gelling better. Everyone's got confidence. It seems like a great fit. And now, how much of this is due to Steve Kerr? I was looking at some stats about, the Warriors have a system. They run the same play and different variations out of that. How much does Steve Kerr really have to do with that? You see him shouting from the sideline, but you have so many smart players on the court like Stephen Curry, Jimmy Butler, Draymond Green. They know where they're supposed to be. They know where they're going. They know what's the best play for that point in time. So I decided to focus on the out-of-bounds plays, stuff that Steve Kerr drew up out of the timeout. See what the points per possession were like between out of bounds plays and just regular running up and down the court plays that, he calls out from the sideline, or the team just runs by themselves. So I went and found a graph that shows how many points per possession the Warriors score regularly and what the difference is when they score off an inbound. How many points do they average off an inbound play? And off a standard play, the Golden State Warriors average 1.37 points per possession, and then off an inbounds play they average 1.6, which the differential is 0.22, and it's one of the bottom in the league. So it's not even like Steve Kerr drawing up these plays is like any different than any other team in the NBA. It's actually towards the bottom. Like, it's not like his play calling is making the Warriors that much better. However, in my opinion, I believe Steve Kerr is a great coach. He is He creates such a great environment for the players. You hear people talking about the practices, how it's fun, everyone wants to be there. It's just a great environment to be around. You hear Jimmy Butler talking about how he loves it there and it's one of the best organizations he's ever played for, and it might be the best. There's a reason Stephen Curry has stayed around so long, Draymond Green. There's a reason Klay Thompson stayed around so long. But there's a lot of questionable things I notice when I'm watching these games. Like, this is recorded after the Nuggets game where they lost, and it's just, there was so many times where I feel like I could have been a better coach out there, where I know I couldn't, but I see Steph Curry get subbed in with Buddy Hield, and I'm like, why are we doing that? We're getting destroyed. Like, they're out-rebounding us, and you put in two players that aren't very great defenders. They're scoring on us the whole time. How many times did I see Michael Porter Jr. just rise up over Buddy Hield and get clean looks because he acts like he is on the other side of the court with his closeout. He waits until Michael Porter goes into his shot, and at that point, he's already at the peak. He can't even see Buddy Hield. So why is he not like face guarding him? Like, Michael Porter Jr. is one of the best shooters in the NBA. And another thing I don't like is game to game, Steve Kerr does not make adjustments. He sticks on this strict, Stephen Curry will play 8 minutes in the first quarter, he'll come in at the 8-minute mark in the second, and he'll finish it out, which doesn't make sense to me. If you're in a close game in the first quarter, why not just play him the full first quarter? Also, why is Jonathan Kuminga on minute restrictions still? Like, he's playing great. In his first game, he had 18 points. Like, he is showing you he can be productive. And in this Nuggets game, it felt like him and Jimmy Butler were the only two people that were able to put the ball in the basket. And he gets subbed out. And I don't see why Steve Kerr will not run Stephen Curry and Jimmy Butler at the same time for more than like 2 minutes. They don't really cross over. He's so focused on the let Jimmy run the second unit, which has been working. But in games where it doesn't work, why don't you run them together? He waits until the fourth quarter when there's very little time left and they're almost going to lose, like it happened in the Mavericks game. It happened in this Nuggets game. He's kept Stephen Curry out of the game for so long, no reason at all. There was no reason to keep him out of the game for so long. But that's all I got to say. If you liked the video, please consider liking and subscribing. If you got something to say, leave it in the comments below. If you agree with me, disagree, share your opinions, and that's all I got to say. Peace.